Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Badbaby. And tonight we have Dr. Joye Jeffries Pugh with us, and she's not in the window yet. I hope she didn't forget or she got my reminder. I don't really want to wing it again tonight, you guys, but let's just keep our fingers crossed that she shows up. Having a little problem here with my laptop, not able to log in through there. Okay, let's get Dr. Joye out here.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Joye. How are you this evening?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I tell you, we've had a lot going on in my household, so it's been kind of a little wild ride the last couple of months.
Well, you know, I hear you. I'm on the same page. You know, I'm lucky I'm even out here because the day I emailed you, I dropped a pitcher of water on my laptop and fried my laptop. So I'm out here on a 2003 desktop that's like a boat anchor.
Oh, gee. Well, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that, how things are happening. It seems like it's just been a real, what I would call a very evil attack. And I had an issue with emails, and, you know, really the people that worked on it could not figure out had somebody really done something to my computer, or had gone in on my computer, or logged in on my computer. But I was not able to receive or send anything. And, of course, my husband was in the hospital at the time and trying to get someone to come and work on it. And I get emails from everyone, and I got afraid, oh, my gracious, you know, these people are trying to get a hold of me. I can't respond and don't know that they're trying to contact me. So I feel your pain when you talk about not having accessibility to be able to discuss whatever with anyone. You get so used to doing that, and then you don't have, like, telephone numbers. Everything's involved with the computer.
Yeah, you know, and the thing is, this computer here, I had my speakers stolen, and I found an old set from another computer, but they don't work, so I had no way to even try to find bumper music to play through the computer. So our bumper music tonight is via my vinyl albums.
Well, you know, I think when there's a will, there's a way. But sometimes what we're having to go through to get to talk about some of these things, it really makes you wonder that there's a bigger agenda that we don't know that we're a part of that's being played out to keep certain things from being known. And, you know, I've ran into, over the course of doing this research like I do, I've actually ran into situations where people, you know, they had their computers blow up and we went off the line, and all kinds of weird things have happened. So I know that sometimes when you start talking about the spiritual realm, if they don't really want you to know the whole picture, the whole story, I think they have the power to kind of attack in strange ways.
Yeah.
Some people that know me, they'll say, well, you know, Joy, if I didn't know you and I didn't see all this happening around you, I would never believe what could really go wrong. And I'm like, yes, and it sometimes just seems like it's a little, you can't say it's just a coincidence. It feels like it's literally a attack, and it's after keeping you from being able to talk about, you know, certain agendas. I think that when you start hitting on some of the things, like I say, in the spiritual realm, that's a realm that is real, and I don't think they particularly like it when you start exposing it in a different way than maybe what they wanted exposed, and that's what my work's all about. It's not saying that it's not real. It's telling you it's very real, but this is why it's real, and this is why to be careful about it. So I have really felt the last couple of months have been very difficult, and the people that I do research with have also felt that way, that their lives have been kind of turned upside down with a lot of things happening that keeps you from being able to do the work that you want to do. And I was very saddened this past week because one of the great radio hosts that I spent was on his show many times was Kevin Bull, and he was from Dublin, Ireland, and got an email from him about 2 weeks ago. He was very ill, and we had planned to do another show, and then I got an email from his wife this week, and Kevin had passed away. And so there's, when you get close to people, just like you and I do in this show, you get to know someone by a voice, and you have a camaraderie really on things that you enjoy talking about and experience, and somehow you get really attached. And, boy, that just really took me down a notch when I found out that Kevin had passed away. He had a great radio show that I totally enjoyed being a part of. He was a counselor, and he had done a lot of research and knew a lot of people all over the world, and he was really a great person. And there have been other ones in the past. There was a guy named Byron LeBeau that was a really, really, really good radio host several years ago that lost his life to cancer. So you miss those people, and you miss having the opportunity to do research with those kinds of individuals. So, like I say, it just seems like there's just been a lot of real sadness and a lot of trying times, and it's I think it plays into end times. I mean, to me, it's just a lot of things happening that we've never seen happen, and you and I have talked about this many times on the shows we've done before. It's that it just seems to be a little much, and very much like what the Bible tells us, that in the last days that these things are going to start happening, and it's going to be a lot of bad stuff all at once in all kinds of places, and like a woman in birth pain.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say, just looking at our weather patterns, I mean, just take one little thing.
Oh, my God. Did you know, since the last show we did, Dr. Joy, do you realize how many more volcanoes are active and popping off?
I'm telling you, and now that is a very people who don't believe that this stuff is escalating. I mean, all they've got to do is go back. Even in my second Beguile book, my volume 2, I listed the beginnings of these volcanoes in an appendix, and I've shown in that book how that increased, and now you can take even my work and go back and look at those appendices and read that work, and then look at today and look at the really statistics of, like you're talking about, the numbers that have escalated, and that's only been in like a year's time. So, it's amazing to me to see the escalation that we're seeing, and change up of, like I say, not only just the volcanoes, but the ones that they anticipate are becoming active, that they're already seeing the rumblings and things that are going to happen. I mean, it's going to become a worldwide event, and you know as well as I do that when you have a lot of volcanic ash that's up in the atmosphere, if you have a lot of eruptions, there could be, I mean, that's a serious thing. I mean, you just think about people flying in planes. They can't even fly a plane through
Well,
it.
not to mention, I was watching on the Weather Channel, and they were explaining what the ash does when it goes around into the jet stream. It gets around into our ozone, and it blocks out the sunlight, which changes our weather. So
That's right.
Expect one hell of a winter again, you guys.
Well, I think that, we're in for a summer that's coming on. I just think we're going to start seeing some real escalation of some serious things. I mean, I think that you can even take and look at the Google Maps and look and see what our country looked like, let's say 20 years ago, and then you take a Google eye look at what we look like now, and there's parts of our country that are desert. I mean, literally, that were nothing like that. And like you say, when one thing starts changing, that's the one thing about my work that I've tried to show, that when you take something that's harmonically set by God and you start changing the harmonics and the frequencies, then just like the ash and all the stuff that goes on with all that, it changes everything.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a one-time event and nothing to worry about. When it starts escalating, then it starts causing major changes. So yes, I think we can only say that we're living in times that tomorrow is going to be different than anything we've ever seen before. The next day is going to be. It's not going to be like old times when things were just kind of like over and over about the same. Especially like when I was growing up, your days were typically the same.
Yeah.
And now, from day to day, we're having strange and unusual things. I mean, just think about the numbers of asteroids and how close they're coming to us, and how they're penetrating the sky, and the numbers of booms that we have been hearing just in our area. I mean, strange stuff.
I mean, what's gone down in Texas, if you go into YouTube and look at some of the videos, right before I lost my laptop, I was looking at some of the flooding videos in Texas, and they were showing these men on those boats that have the wheel, or the air boats, you know what I mean?
Right,
the ones that go, and they were trying to herd these cattle out of the flood. They were swimming, and there were 3 of them, and they were trying to push the cattle to go towards the edge. And you could hear the men yelling back and forth that we got to get them over to the side soon because the calves weren't going to make it. They were drowning.
That's right. I mean, this is things that have never happened. You know, we don't have any records that show that these things have ever happened like this. I mean, when you start talking about the changes in all this stuff, if you go back and we've been keeping pretty good historical records for a good number of years, and never has it occurred in these places. I mean, everybody that comes on, like if you're watching a radio show or hear a radio show, or if you're watching a newscast, the first thing that they'll do when they interview people, they'll be like, I've lived here 50 years. I've never seen any, they'll be just beyond this. So it's something that they know that if they lived in that area, like my parents and grandparents all lived in this area. I mean, I would be able to say that back to my grandparents' day, they never saw the kinds of things that I'm seeing today.
Well, and and the thing is too, I don't sleep. I haven't been sleeping a lot lately at night because I went to the chiropractor, and unfortunately he broke my sacroiliac bone.
Oh, gee.
So I have pretty much been like flat on my back for the last month, but I've still been coming out here doing my shows, even though I'm in a lot of pain while I'm sitting here. But I'll plug through.
The
thing is, remember I told you I was going to go off the air? Well, I haven't been off the air yet, Dr. Joy.
Well, the thing about it is you have a calling to try to reach people. And when you have a calling upon your life, it's hard not to continue to broadcast and give information to people who are desperately wanting to know things. I mean, there are some people who don't have the time to sit down and read. They can listen to a show and get so much out of it. So you're providing something that the normal ABC, NBC, and CBS are not going to provide.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part, is that they don't want to, if you see a little blip maybe run across CNN about some of these asteroids or the weather or something, but they're like little blips. They don't really go into detail. And then when you start really looking.
And the thing is, mainstream news is not going to, they're paid off mouthpieces.
Well,
they
come
out here and tell us
things
from what is on the way.
Right, because I don't think they want panic, and they want to sell stuff. You know what I'm saying? They sell their news to do things, and sometimes in the selling of the newscasts that they do, they bring a lot of discourse to our country. I mean, there's things that I think that they escalate that shouldn't be escalated. I mean, and they go for the people who, to me, are doing wrong and make them look like they're doing right, and the poor guys that are trying to do right, it's like they've done wrong. It's a game being played, and I don't know how children today are growing up and having any understanding about right and wrong. I mean, we grew up in a time, when I had teachers that would paddle your rear end for doing wrong. Well, people say, well, you can be abused. We didn't have the problems in our school systems. We were able to pray. The teacher said, sit down and be quiet, you sat down and you were quiet. If you didn't, they'd take you out in the hall, they'd paddle you, send you up to the principal, and they'd call your mom and dad. Well, the last thing I ever wanted was my mom and dad call to say that I was misbehaving in that school. And now it's almost like teachers have lost the capability to make their children mind. Well, if you've got everybody running around doing their own thing, saying, you're not my mother, you can't teach a class under that kind of situation. And I tell you, once you get lawless individuals who don't succumb to commands, and the Bible tells us, you have a master. There are people, you can always have a master in your life, whether it be, the policeman telling you to get out of the car and put your hands on the ground, or whether you're going to one day answer to a higher power saying, this is what I expected out of you. I think that if you don't understand law and the following of law and respect it, then there's nothing to keep it from becoming like an animal kingdom where let's say the survival of the fittest and the biggest people win. And we're seeing more and more of that. I tell you, with all the problems that the police are having right now, I don't know that you could pay me to be a policeman. Well, if we get to the point that we don't have anybody wanting to be a policeman anymore, then what happens to our society? We're setting ourselves up for a major, major failure. And I think that the news media are pushing to see that happen in our country, because what happens when we become so ruthless like that, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to throw us under martial law, and that's where they want us. And they are pushing us using this agenda right in that direction. And when they do, they're going to take away everything. And they're going to say, well, we got to do it because we got to protect. And there's coming a time. It's just like all these people who take pictures of these, numbers of coffins that are being transported up down the railroad stations and stuff. I have a person that does research on just that sends me these pictures of all these things that, that they know there's going to be some kind of mass undertaking of people dying. Yeah. And you've got all these concentration camps.
Well, did you hear what happened up here in Michigan? They were doing drills with these helicopters over Port Huron, and they missiled the Sperry's department store building, blew it to smithereens, and said it was an accident. That it was an accident. They didn't mean to fire it, but it fired. Well, what gets me is if it's just an exercise, what are you using live ammo for?
That's right. See, there's all this stuff that's going on that it's being done all around the country with other countries coming in and training, and then the United Nations having certain things that they expect of their soldiers. And then if you read some of the things even in our manuals in regard to the higher echelon, what I would say, of certain specialized forces, you can get an understanding that they're wanting to know, are you willing to shoot American citizens, and can you do that?
Well, that's a form that they had to fill out in the military. I had Dr. Jim Garrow on, and he was retired CIA. Do you know who he is?
Yes, I do. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had him on one night, and he was talking about this form that they all had to fill out, and in that form it asked if they were willing to shoot American citizens, and if they didn't answer it yes, then they found a way to get rid of them.
That's exactly right. Like I say, I have a guy that I do some research with that's worked at the Pentagon, and then I have another guy that's a retired military person who actually sent me a copy of that for me to have, and it's very real. It's very true that that's the case, that if you're willing to do for them, then you get the chance to move on up and do specialized forces. If you're not, then it's kind of like in Freemasonry, when you get to a certain level, then thank you very much, and you've done a great job, but you don't get to go on up to the 75th level that nobody knows about. There's other ways to do other things, and you pacify those that don't want to do that, and then you take the ones that are willing to do whatever, and then you use them as your, as the people to actually manipulate and do these kinds of things around not only our country but around the world.
Well, you realize Mr. Obama has just signed another executive order giving them the right to use military force on American citizens on U.S. soil. Did you know that?
That's right. And a lot of people, unfortunately, do not look at the executive orders that not only Obama, but just going back and look at what Bush did, and even right on back. I mean, you can go way on back and look at these executive orders. It's not something that just started yesterday. But that's the thing, is that I don't think people realize that when executive orders are put in, many times they're not broadcast, but they're in place. They become the law of the land.
Have
and
you
many
noticed
times
he does a lot of this when there's a holiday or something going on?
Oh yeah, there's always I have always called it
nobody pays
wagging the dog. In other words, they'll keep something going, or either sign it late at night, or like on a Christmas Eve night.
Yeah.
They've always done stuff like this, and they have something else going on to get the American public involved in that, and everybody's looking at that while they take care of this, and it's done. I just like I say in my book, Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666, I wrote a lot about that, about maritime law, and about how our Constitution really wasn't reinstated, and a lot about why the Civil War happened like it did, and what we've been taught in our history books is not really what occurred. And when you do the research on it, and you start seeing that we're, even all of our parks and recreational areas in the United States belong to the United Nations. I mean, there's a park in our area that has a sign that says that.
Really?
And the first time I went by it, I was like,
"What park is that, Dr. Joy?"
It's our regular little park that's out there that was one time owned by the state, and it has their state rangers and stuff out there. But then it's got a sign out there under the United Nations. I mean, I'm like, excuse me? But then when I saw that, I started looking at that, and that sign's been out there for years, back under the Clinton administration and before that. So it's not something that a lot of people really got a grip on as to what and who is involved with this country. It's just like when we started having this economic problem in our country with our banks, and China came in and bought up a lot of land, and other countries have bought up a lot of land. And there's certain places in our country where American law is not even in existence.
Nope.
And you're like, okay, this is America. Well, we're not really the America. We're not the America that was America when I was a child. And it's scary to me to know that, especially my forefathers and right on up to my uncles who fought in all these major wars, and some of my forefathers lost their lives trying to fight for freedom and rights and godly kinds of principles and laws for us to have a safe and secure living environment. And to think how that's just been like thrown out by the wayside. I mean, they would be rolling over in their graves if they could see what's happening in our country. It's very scary.
Sorry, Marlo's not behaving. Well, we are going to talk about.
Agreeing.
Hold on, let me yell at him. Marlo, we're going to talk about the black-eyed children tonight. So let's get on topic here.
Well, that was one area that I had looked into because of my interest in fallen angels and the alien agenda. And, of course, that's always been a folklore that they say was really started back in the 1990s about the black-eyed children and that kind of thing. But I find it interesting that in any of this paranormal things, when people see strange and unusual things, that you need to be paying attention to it. And I think it's important because I always go back and say, well, you not think, well, that is not human, but it is human. What really is going on? And I always go back and say, well, look at the Bible. You had angels walking around in human form, literally. You had demons that were possessing people, and when Christ called them out, they talked to him, and then they went running into the swine, and the swine went running in the water and drowned themselves. I mean, so we've had something here with us a long, long time. And the manifestation of how they can present themselves, I think, has been in a variety of ways. And I know when I was doing my book, Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666, I had a chapter, I think it was 27, that was on nothing but about this demonology and the fact that there has always been the acknowledgement of different kinds of fallen angels. And, of course, they use different words, like Albert Pike, he had a name for them, and then the woman that wrote The Secret Doctrine, she had another name for them, but they all believed that they were here among us and that they were working with us and that they were laying down certain knowledge and information to us. And then, if you look at the teachings of Gnosticism, they believe that the world is actually ruled by these archons. So, and I think that it really stems to truth. And I even look at, in the work that I did, I even looked at like King James, that really did the Bible, King James version of the Bible. He was an avid believer in demons, and he actually wrote a book called Demonology. And I think that if you deny that there's strange and unusual beings that can be here, then you can't really say it's no different than the alien agenda. There's something going on. There's something very real about people who see strange little creatures. And, of course, we know that, like the little children with the black eyes, you've got the grays that have the black eyes. And then in our area, it's very interesting, but for years and years, they would say that there were these called the little people. And there's always been like little stories of, being out in the woods. And, of course, we're in a very wooded, populous, area, not too far from Okefenokee Swamp. But there's always been stories over the, generations.
One of the things that I find interesting about the stories that I have researched about the black-eyed children is that people fear them, but when they come to your house and ring your doorbell and ask to come in, they don't try to force themselves in, and they can't come in unless you invite them in. And that's exactly what the Bible says about demons, that they won't be able to touch you unless you invite them in.
That's right, and I think that, I'm like you, that's the one thing about those children and the people that have dealt or said that they were dealing with something that was like that you're right. A demonic force has the capability, but unless you allow it in, and that's the thing, is that a lot of people sometimes get involved with sorcery, and they'll get involved with using drugs and trying to really, sorcery is the same thing as pharmacy. I mean, you can use whatever. The old shamans used to use they'd smoke the weed and whatever, and they'd get really, really high, and they'd have a drum beat going, and they would get into a frenzy, and then they would get into a mediumship. And when you do that, you're inviting that stuff in. You're opening the pineal gland up.
They take peyote buttons. That's some kind of a mushroom that makes you hallucinate.
That's right. And when they would do that, these beings that really exist around us, and we know that's true because the Bible tells us that these things were real, and that Jesus, he literally talked to them, and of course they knew who he was when the Pharisees and
the other thing that I have researched about them is the fact that the people that have invited them in, or like there's a story about a woman that went into a party store, and when she got out, her son was in the back seat, and she looked up, and there was a black-eyed child in the back seat with this child, and she said, where did you come from? And she made him get out of the car, and she ran in the store with her child. Well, she asked her child, where did he come from? And he said, well, he said he needed help and wanted to come in, so I opened the door and let him in. Mm-hmm. And that child got very, very ill. Her son got very ill from inviting that black-eyed child in their car.
Yes. I think that's the thing that's so unusual, is that demons play a lot of games, and they're able to possess and do. It's no different than the alien agenda, where you've got these same gray little beings, and they all look alike. I mean, literally, they all are the same height. They all have the same shape. They all have the same eyes. I mean, it's kind of like a similarity to the black-eyed children. And I know, in the modern-day practice of sorcery, I found some interesting things about a demon by the name of Raktua. And what it is that's watcher spelled backwards. I mean, there's little games, and I think that's the thing that the Bible tells us to watch, is that demons are tricksters. They use certain things to, like you say, gets your attention, then you feel sorry, or you don't think it's a problem, and you invite it in, and then once you get it in, then how do you get rid of it? And, of course, anyone that's ever done any reading, especially in the books that I feel like are really important if people want to know about exorcism, were the books that Malachi Martin wrote. And some of his things, being possessed by demons and how the Catholic Church was involved in trying to exorcise those demonic beings and what they encountered, and how many of those priests, if they were not really together and prayed up right, those demons, when they actually drove them out of the person that was, having the problem, those demons jumped on them and then they died. So, I mean, these are case studies, and I would invite anyone that's interested in that Malachi Martin's work, Hostage to the Devil, is worth a good read, because, and I quote a lot of his stuff in my books, because I felt like it was very researched and it's very real. I mean, it's case studies that were done that these people actually died from that. So it's not something to play with. It's not, people, unfortunately, most kids, just like I did when I was growing up, we would do like little seances because we'd heard, about stuff like that, and be playing around, just like with a Ouija board, and then something happens and it moves, and then you're like, that we didn't do that. That was something that happened.
Yeah,
and you get so
really
scared, you go, let me don't ever get near that again. I mean, literally. But then, what happens is,
do you realize that they marketed a pink one for little girls this year?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and now that Ouija board and all the stuff about that on the films and things have been brought forward, I would tell anybody, as a child, we had one of the first ones, I guess, that they ever talked about like that. And I'll never forget, we used to play games like, for example, who's your boyfriend? I mean, we're talking about first and second grade. Who's your boyfriend? We'd push it around because we'd know that their boyfriend was Bruce or David or whatever. We'd spell it out. And then one day we were playing with it like that, and it moved, and we looked at each other, and then we were like, you moved it. And they were like, no, you moved it. And like, no, I didn't touch it. I didn't move it. Then you began to go, I don't want to touch that anymore. You became scared of it. And I would tell anyone that there's something to all of that, because the spiritual realm is very real. And right now they are trying to get children involved, and they make it like it's fun. It's like a Harry Potter, get a wand and start playing with a wand. Well, you and I know, if you've done anything on actually ground water and you what you call water witching, where you use dowsing rods, and you can take a certain stick and it'll be in a V shape, and when you walk out and you find water, it will literally pull that stick and you right down, and you can literally feel the Earth energy coming up, and you know that there's groundwater. I mean, that's how they used to search for wells or dig for wells when I was a little girl. That's what they would do. So this stuff, this energy is very, very real. And so when you start talking about using a wand and doing this kind of stuff, I'm like, you're setting your child up, yes, like we were playing, but then when something happens, if they continue to get involved in it, then these things are going to start attacking them. They're going to start getting a part of their lives. And then instead of you being able to say, well, I don't want to do that anymore, it's locked on to you. And like I say, I would tell anyone that's thinking about playing with that stuff, they need to read Malachi Martin's Hostage to the Devil. And you don't need to read it at night before you go to bed. It's kind of like my books, because he hits home. He's not like making you feel like sugarcoating it. He tells you like it is. And it's very serious. It is a very serious thing right now that's being played out in our world. Every time you turn around, you see all these skulls and stuff on little kids' outfits.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, excuse me, why would you want to put a dead skull on a baby's outfit? In my wildest dreams, what you're doing to that child's thought processes. But then if you get them accustomed to it, then death and dying and evil and all this stuff, they get so accustomed to it that they will accept these beings. And when you're a child and your mind is so open to whatever, that's when a lot of things start happening to kids. And I tell you, the increase in...
But children are curious.
Yes, they are. And the moment that you have that and you get locked into it, it changes their life forever. I mean, the first experience they have.
They're going after the children because they're, I know down in Florida, they're handing out satanic coloring books in the schools to the children. And they're pushing Satanism towards the children. I'm hearing that Harry Potter books are demanded book reports for the children.
That's right. And once you start doing that and you make it like it's nothing to it, it's no different than this, I believe a senator or representative, I believe out in Texas, is trying to get the age limit lowered for, being involved with sexual promiscuity. Well, when you start lowering that age, that you can't, be, I guess, prosecuted for, statutory rape or molestation or whatever, if you get a child's consent to have sex with them, then it'll be okay. That is, our country has gone so bad the opposite way, and the numbers of even in the Catholic Church of pedophilia, oh my gosh, that is rampant. And really nothing has been majorly done about it. I noticed that the new Pope has tried to make some conversation about it, but in the long run, when you start with a person and this happens to them, most times a molester was molested by somebody who was molested, and you cause a vicious cycle to begin. And the same thing with people who get involved with these demonic entities in their lives. It follows the family around. There are people who have, doors shutting and closing and all kinds of weird stuff, and they can't stay in the house because of the poltergeist activity. It's not like they're making this stuff up. It's very, very real. And turning a blind eye to it, like a lot of Christian churches do, is the worst thing in the world because it's in the spiritual realm. They'll say, oh, that's just made up. That's not. But if you look at it, everything that the Bible is telling us is that we don't fight against flesh and blood. It tells us very specifically, you fight against principalities and higher places, and it's such a great force that you alone can't fight it. And that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
That something is right here with us that we can't see, that can be playing and manipulating us, and has been doing that. The research that I've done in my book shows that there's been a manipulation going on since the days of the Garden of Eden. And that's one of the reasons why I named my series of books, this latest series of books, Beguiled, Volume 1, 2, and 3, Eden to Armageddon, because I wanted to show people this is how much beguilement and trickery that's been played on humanity from the day that the creation of Adam and Eve took place, and how it has escalated to right now what we're going through. And I tell you, once you start looking around, you can start seeing red flags everywhere, and that's one thing that people will, send me emails or call me or whatever and say, Joy, I never paid attention to this stuff, and it was right in my face. And now, after reading your work, it's like every time I turn around, I'm like, oh, man, goodness, red flag, red flag, red flag. And I'm like, it's because it's a game. It's a subliminal game against you, and if you're not smart enough to see the enemy, they are totally taking advantage of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we had a couple questions. I think I passed them up. One was about Ron Paul, so we won't go back into that one. Someone else asked me if I heard of Jade Helm in Michigan, any activity in Michigan. Yes, they blew the Sperry's building up in downtown Port Huron. It was an accident. And, if you ever look on the movies, when they shoot those missiles off of those helicopters, they have a safety that they flip up, and then they push the button, right, Dr. Joy?
That's right. And see, the thing about all of this stuff is that they are supposed to be in a military district. I know that the military base that we have just below where I live, it's all marked off. They'll tell you, do not come in that area. This is a military installation. We are going to do bombing, because they do bombing there.
Well, this was downtown Port Huron, and it was in like a strip mall. It was in the middle, and Sperry's, and I think it's an insurance job. I think the person who owns it's going to get something out of it. That's why they did that one, because it's been out of business for a while. And when they hit it, it blew the whole building out. It looked just like Iraq. The bricks were out into the first lane of the streets. They had it roped off with police, and they said it was an accident. But my question is, if this is a drill, again, if this is a drill, why are you using live ammo? Something stinks here. And then when the ones that they did over in Flint, Michigan, there was an abandoned school there that I think it was a tank. It looks like a tank or some kind. Maybe they had that thing that they sit on their shoulder and shoot, but there were 3 huge holes blown in this school, and they were just it was like they were under attack. They never told anybody in these neighborhoods, and elderly people were having heart attacks.
I mean, it's coming. You can honestly say this is a setup for martial law, and they are keeping the people so against each other. They try to drive the blacks against the whites and the Mexicans against this one and this one against that one, and they keep us all stirred up. Nobody is ever happy with anything. It's always, somebody owes me for what happened back in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And they haven't even read the research of the history of, what really happened, or they would realize that it's all a game that's being played to cause a diversion in such a way that you hate each other so they can literally, it's like a Hegelian principle. It's setting up something that they want for us that we would not want, and that is complete surveillance and control. And they do it by making us do stupid things so they can justify bringing in martial law.
Well,
and they're getting ready for it.
That night. The Sperry's building is 20 minutes from my house. And I heard a bunch of helicopters, but see, I live in between 2 Air Force bases, and they're always going back and forth across the top of my house because it's like a road for them to go up there to Bay City to the base up there, Mm-hmm. So, I didn't think anything of it. And then when I saw it, it was on the front page of the newspaper, Sperry's was under attack, Black Hawk down in Port Huron. I was like, oh, my God, that's what they said, Black Hawk down.
Well, that's the thing that just, you can't just assume. Everything that's been done in the past was always done on the military bases under, lock and key. And for things to get out of hand and being done like you're talking about, it's an escalation of showing you that they're moving out from that into the civilian areas and that they are starting to pay attention to more than what you want to believe they know. It's no different than the use of drones and surveillance stuff where they can sit right over the top of your house and about peer into everything that you've got. I mean, we have come to the total, I think total reality right now that we're a surveillance society, whether people want to believe it or not. I fully believe.
Did you hear that all the Walmarts are look at the Walmarts. If you ever go into a Walmart now, you people better start looking. There is a round, black-faced camera, and it is a facial recognition.
That's right. And, this is the thing, is the more that they can pin you down on facial recognition, on all that kind of stuff, then the records are there. And if you ever try to escape or do anything, if there was martial law, you don't have a prayer. I don't care if you've got a cabin in the woods in the middle of the mountains and you've got it 10 feet down. People who think they're going to get away from this, I don't believe there's anywhere to run, because I think that every one of us, from the research I've done, our DNA has its own harmonic, actually, fingerprint. And it can be tracked because it's harmonically. We've got a pineal gland that's giving off a certain frequency. And if something has the ability to pick up that frequency, it's like infrared in the middle of the night, and you can use the infrared and see people walking around. I mean, literally, if your DNA is giving off a certain whatever, they can find you. It's not like you can hide from your own body's harmonic resonance. You can't do it. I mean, it's like a cell phone. They can track cell phones everywhere now, in everybody's pockets. And people used to think, oh, well, they had it turned off. Well, they can track it if it is turned off.
Yeah. Well, did you see the new drone that they have the laser on it, where they can explode your house from the drone with a laser?
Yes, and I think that's the thing, is that these drones are so sophisticated that, like I say, you think you can hide? Like I say, there is not going to be a place for anyone to hide.
Oh. And you know what? What I say to that? Get your spiritual house in order, people.
Well, that's it. And I think that's what the Bible was trying to tell us is that, you know, when you see these things start coming to pass, look up because your redemption draweth nigh. It doesn't say you can run. It doesn't say you can hide. It says look up, and that's like you're saying. Get your house in order so that your redemption can be out of this mess and not a part of the destruction that's going to happen with it. And that's a serious thing. I mean, you know, we're talking about things that the prophets wrote about, 2,000-3,000 years ago, and we're seeing their words literally manifest on a daily basis. Now, because, like I say, before you might have a little something here happen here and a little something happen there, but now it's worldwide, diverse places, strange things, the way that humanity is going, and just look at the types of sicknesses that people are coming down with. I mean, I was talking to a lady today where there was a lady that had been in our church, and she was fine one Sunday. She had pneumonia, and then she was dead. Boom. And I was like, don't you think that's a little strange? A long time ago, people got pneumonia. They first got a bad cold, and then they got pneumonia. Now they just come down with this weird stuff, and they're gone. It's like, boom.
Yeah.
And you're seeing more and more, kids coming down with really strange things, a lot of neurological stuff, and a lot of things that, yes, that can be blamed on the vaccination programs. That I've done a lot of research and talked about that because of the condition that my husband got from a flu shot. People don't realize that you can become, totally neurologically damaged by these things, but it does happen.
Well,
they just don't broadcast it.
One shot that they were giving the teenage girls. There was a girl over here in Canada. She was a cheerleader, perfectly healthy, and Cartisol is what it is. And she took that, and now she's totally crippled. Her
That's
legs,
right.
her knees went in, and she walks all deformed. But when she runs, she can run normal, and she can walk backwards normal. Did you ever?
That's right. She has something called dystonia. And it's very, it happens. And like I say, there's just a lot of children that are experiencing some strange things. And then I think about also, I mentioned this in my work about the genetically modified foods that we're consuming that our bodies are not able to assimilate. Our livers are not able to break it down correctly, and then this stuff lodges in your body, and it can't get rid of it. It's not natural to it.
Yeah.
And it's like you're poisoning yourself.
I think they're going after the reproductive system of the children, too. Because
I think,
I read about
cortisol,
what it's going to do is it's going to hinder them from being able to get pregnant.
Well, I talked about a study that was done by the World Health Organization in my book, Eden, about how they really went in there and they said they were going to get rid of this particular problem. And when they gave them these vaccinations for what they were promising was going to be, a stopping of like typhoid fever or something like that, what happened was they all became sterile. So you're like, well, isn't that kind of strange that they were trying to stop the population in that particular area?
You mentioned sterile because did you happen to see them talking about the new Viagra for women on the morning show?
Oh, yes. And that's another thing. To me, we are becoming a sex-crazed society. And that's one thing in my Beguile series that I really went back and looked at what happened in the Garden of Eden and why sex is a concern and how it's being pushed down the throats of everybody, sexual all the time. I mean, if you look at TV, if you look at the ads on TV, I mean, there's some ads on TV that are just mouth dropping because they can't believe they're doing that.
All of the sitcoms are about sex. All of the sitcoms, they all talk about sex. It's all.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And you can't even hardly get a movie, go see a movie, watch a TV program without it just being in your face.
Yep.
And when you go back and do the research like I did in the Garden of Eden about what really, really happened and why it was that even in Genesis 1, that the male and female were made after their own kind to produce seed after their own kind. And every bird was to be after its own kind. Every tree, it wasn't supposed to have all this mixed together. In other words, the red birds went with the red birds, bluebirds. That's the way that it was set up. And when you start mingling and mixing DNA from opposite things together, then you start producing problems. And purity was one of the biggest things coming out of the Garden of Eden that was establishing what the lineage would be that Jesus Christ had to be born from, so that he could literally come and be able to die on a cross and then save humanity. So it's this pureness is it's a major thread all through the Bible. And I don't think people stop and really look that when, for example, Adam and Eve were married, and God married them, started the institution of marriage. Well, you would think, well, why was it important that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had to be married, but every other animal didn't? There's something very different about us and animals, and why the institution of marriage was so important. And when people talk about, well, it's okay for, two guys to be married and two women to be married, well, no, it's not okay. According to Scripture, that's not okay. It cannot be okay, because the man and the wife had to produce a seed after their kind. Two men can't do that. Two women can't do that. Even they're trying to get this thing now where, it's okay for humans to go with animals. In the book of Leviticus, if you did that, they killed you. I mean, literally took you out to the edge of the camp and they got rid of you. Mosaic law was a very terrible thing when it came to you don't do these kinds of things,
Well, with this Viagra for women, I found it interesting that they were skeptical about passing it, and the reason is because they have no idea what it will do to the reproductive system of a woman. It could make her sterile. It could make the babies come out deformed. So they don't. In other words, they're playing Russian roulette again.
Well, I think this is why the Bible tells us that if in the end of days, it says, unless the time is cut short, no flesh could be saved. And right now, with the mixing of all this stuff like I'm talking about, true flesh, the way that God created it, is becoming non-existent. And that's what happened in the days of Noah, which tells us that the end of days will be like the days of Noah. And that was that the giants who were birthed from the fallen angels having sexual relationships with humanity's true women, they were producing these things that were not right. It was taken over. So the true lineage, which Noah was born from, all the way from Adam back to Seth, or Adam and Seth, and then on down to Noah, to get across the flood to save the pure lineage, God had to bring the flood to do that, because if it hadn't, Noah, according to the Bible, was the last pure left lineage on the face of the earth, and that's why he and his family were chosen and put in that ark like they were, so that when they got on the other side of the flood, that they could repopulate, and that the lesser of what God wanted here wouldn't be able to repopulate at the same amount. But what's happened is they were able to reconstitute their DNA and get back involved with that kind of stuff and the paganism and that kind of thing. And I try to trace that all through my Beguile series books right on up to today, and we're back in the same situation. Now we've got everything mixed. I mean, we can't even eat a tomato that's not mixed with a grape. Or, you go down and you can't even get something that has a seed in it anymore. Well, that's not right, because the Bible says that you will have seed after their own kind. I mean, a seedless watermelon, a seedless lemon, a seedless apple. I mean, you're getting to the point that that's not exactly what we're supposed to be doing, because that's changing everything in our existence into something that is not. It's a mixed up world. And when you do that to stuff, you can never go back. You can't fix it and redo it. And it's a big money-making thing to be in biotechnology and to be on the cutting edge of even mixing humans with monkeys. And right now there are apes out there that have got human genes. There are
Yeah,
cows
I've seen
out there
pictures
producing.
of them with human faces.
Yes, and it's not. I mean, it's like the poor rats with the growing human ears on their backs.
There are dogs that have human faces.
So, you know, this we're talking about the things that were happening prior to the flood, and that brought about the flood. So, if that's what was happening before the flood, and it tells us that the last days of the final generation will be like the days of Noah, we are there. We are there.
Absolutely, I totally agree. We are, and the time is short, and we are seeing
yes,
the
I do think it's very short. I think it's a lot shorter than we can even think in our minds. I know a lot of people want to think about, you know, what's 20 years down the road or whatever, but we can't continue on the road we're going and be able to exist under that circumstance as we have in the past. The world is not even the same. I mean, literally, just look at what the Ebola outbreak did in Africa. And, you know, that's not even publicized a lot anymore, but there's still a lot of people dying from that.
Well, did you hear that they just put an article out about the bird...
avian bird flu?
Yes, that's going around. They're saying that it's ready to almost transfer to humans now.
Well, you know, there are some people that, you know, have contracted that, especially in those countries like China and Japan where they work with, like, chickens on a daily basis. There have been cases where humans have died from being around those particular birds like that.
Well, I find it interesting when they get out there on mainstream news and start predicting this stuff. I just look at it like, that's the next little virus you're going to activate with the chemtrails or something. You know what I mean?
Well, we know that the chemtrails are very strange and unusual because of the way that they dissipate in the air and how they're not like a normal plane flying. And, you know, you stop and you think about, like you mentioned, the weather patterns. And, you know, China, when I wrote in my book, Beguile, they had used so many shells and put up in the air trying to make it rain. You know, you start adding stuff to the ionosphere and you start changing the bubble on which we live, then you know that fallout is no different than what happened with the nuclear fallout from Fukushima over in Japan. That's still being felt and will continue to be felt forever.
Still dumping radiation in the ocean.
That's right. And there's places already in our ocean where there's nothing. I mean, there's not even anything growing on the bottom. And those are just
things dying.
Dead
radiation is killing everything. You know, and I just looked at an article, and I could not believe the pictures, the aerial pictures, because the nuclear waste from Fukushima is in square boxed containers in squared-off sections, not 25, 30 feet from the edge of the ocean. Just sections and sections of it. And now they're asking for permission to dump it.
That's right.
Dump it in the ocean.
And the thing about it, our oceans are already in trouble. I mean, look at the numbers of dead fish and mammals.
My heart just weeps when I see all the whales that are coming up on the beaches dead, and the dolphins, and, you know, everything's dying. And, you know, and I just think, oh, my God, those poor creatures, how they must be suffering from this, from what man's doing to this planet.
Well, you know, the thing about it is I don't think a lot of people really realize that when we have, like, dead fish wash up on one of our shores, that like in Japan and China and other places, they're having huge numbers in the millions wash up at the same time. And that's a very strange thing to me, that you could have so many deaths of animals worldwide when you would think, well, if it was in that one area, and let's say that was a poison or whatever, but that's not the case. It's no different than the Arkansas bird case where they blamed it on the fireworks, and then the next year, the same day, they had the same thing happen, but yet there were no fireworks. And then when they take these animals into the laboratories and they open them up trying to figure out what's wrong with them, they never really are able to determine what really happened to those animals. On most cases, they'll try to say, well, maybe they got into shallow water, or maybe they got into an area that something had been sprayed. But there's all kinds of weird things about these dead animals, like turning upside down and flipping upside down, and like ducks flying out of the sky and just flying right straight into the pavement. I mean, you can't think that that's all just a freak coincidence when it's happening all over the world like this. I mean, it's a lot of things dying. And I think there's a lot of humanity dying. And I don't think people are doing, like, autopsies. They just take for whatever, well, they had pneumonia, or they had this, or their hearts start beating, or they had a bad cold or something. But is it really that? Is something else not really going on? It's just like the whooping cough and the escalation of the measles and just other things that are outbreaking that shouldn't really be an outbreak. And it's no different than if you take off and go on a cruise now, your chances of coming home with the norovirus or whatever. I mean, when I was young, we went on cruises. You never had anything like that. So
yeah, they have been having a lot of with the cruise ships again, with people coming down with illnesses. And, and I went on a cruise twice, and, I just couldn't imagine being stuck on a ship with a bunch of sick people.
Oh, listen, I can't imagine either. And the thing about it, when we used to ride those ships a long time ago before they had a lot of stabilizers, and I tell you, they get rocking and rolling, and everybody be turning green, throwing up, but it was from what you would say seasickness. It was not like there was a virus on board with everybody. And I think that, we're talking about the problems out in the oceans. I mentioned in my book, Eden, and as well as my Beguile series, about these red tides and how the stuff that they give off is a neurological toxin that can be used as really in warfare, and has been used by our country in warfare, because the toxin is so great. When it's sprayed, it'll kill everything in its pathway. And so you think about cruise ships out there and these dead spots in the ocean, and people are out there on their balconies and stuff, and you go through that area and you move on through the night, and then everybody starts getting sick. Well, do they realize that they went through an area that maybe everybody that was outside picked up something, and then that led to something else, or the air conditioned vents picked it all up and they were all breathing it? I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities with the way the ocean and the fish and everything's dying out there.
Well, we are having a lot, and not only in just the ocean. I mean, if you go in and there is a list you can Google. I used to read off to my listeners. I haven't been able to look at it lately, but there is a list of, all you got to do is just put in your Google search engine, animal die-off in the last year, and it'll pull up the list, and there are elk and just everything. Cattle,
everything.
Right. Everything's just dying off.
Well, like I say, in my Beguile Volume 2, I tried to do that in an appendices, and it got so big that I just literally had to stop putting the stuff in there, because I'm thinking I would have volume after volume after volume of things that happen every day around the world that are just escalating like that. And you don't realize it till you start seeing it all in context. And then you go, my gracious. How much can this continue to die off before there's no food to feed the people that are here? And there's no clean water for people to drink that are here.
The main thing that we're really losing are our honeybees.
Oh, yeah. That was one of the first things that I mentioned in my book, Eden, that I noticed was the first, what I would call, concern, because the honeybee is so important to the pollination of the world. And when those things start dying, there's no pollination. Mankind cannot pollinate. In other words, we have to rely on those bees to do that. And there's been all kinds of research, and I mentioned some research in both of my books, Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil, and this Beguile series, where even being near cell phones, the bees get confused. I mean, there's some weird stuff going on with bees and beehives and dials and that kind of stuff. And the other thing that I mentioned...
an article up here in Michigan, right over here in Ontario, they showed just piles and piles. I can't remember, there was a number, it was outrageous, and the man was holding a handful of dead bees.
Yeah.
Beekeeper. All of his bees are dead
Are
over there.
dead.
And that's right across from me, 20 minutes across from me, and I'm not seeing any bees at my farm.
See, that's the thing is that I grew up where we had a lot of people do the honeybee, and they put the boxes out into the forest areas on people's property, and that's where they harvest their honey. And we used to have all kinds of beekeepers doing that. But they've had major die-offs like that, and they'll blame it on, well, it could be this, and it could be that, and it could be the fact that we're now using, GMO corn, and we're using Roundup that's built into the peanut vine so that nothing will, eat on it. There's all kinds of possibilities of, pesticides.
Well, it could be the chemtrails too.
Well, it could be that, but it can also be, like I'm saying, noticing that the cell phones and put it near them, and it makes them, they go nuts, like they don't know which way to fly. It affects their
I'm
ability.
noticing that with the birds on my farm, that they keep hitting the window, and I think it has to do with the radiation and the frequencies, and I think the smart meters and all the wireless it's just the animals, it's affecting them.
Well, I think a pretty good example of that is when you've got like whales and things that use sonar, and now they're beaching themselves because they're off migratory paths that they normally would use and get into shallow water. I don't think they're in shallow water for a reason of just, wanting to be in shallow water. I literally think that the playing around with sonar in our military apparatuses, as well as the change-up, I think our sun is affecting the magnetic grid. Our grids are changing, and when that changes the magnetic north pole. All that's been shifting. I mean, it's like Greenland lost all its ice. Antarctica, it's lost ice. There's once you change those migratory things, I think that's what happens to some of the birds that end up in the wrong places. There's been birds that have migrated to certain areas for years and years and years for history. And then all of a sudden they end up somewhere else.
Another thing I've noticed, I haven't seen any monarch butterflies.
Oh, yeah, that's something we used to have a lot of in our area. We don't see that. In fact, we don't have the butterflies. When I was a child, we had so many butterflies that we would do like those little books and things for science projects, where you would lay them flat and you would, do the species and whatever name it was, and we would enter into science fair kind of things. You had so many of them. Now, you're lucky if you see one or two.
Right. Well,
and all that stuff
we're
is
losing
important.
our creatures, and the Bible tells us in the last days that these would be the things that we'd see, and we're seeing it more and more and more, and we're seeing the buildup of the military and the wars and the rumors of the wars, and, it's all falling in place.
Well, about the same time that I noticed that the honeybee was having problems, the bat population in our area, and also the little green, what I call rain frog, all those became less and less and less. So there's a lot of stuff going on that they can blame. That might be pesticides, might be this, might be that. They're guessing because they've yet to find out why. And if you really go back and look at some of the scientific labs that got a lot of these things to look at, they're unsure. They don't have a definite cause, and I think that's the thing that they might say something about. There was a fish washing up, but they'll say and they were taken in for analysis, and the preliminary thing is that they could have gotten into this, and this. But then if you follow up and go back and say, okay, well the preliminary said something 6 months ago, what did the final report come out and say? And you will find that most times it will say death by unknown cause. But the people that don't go back and follow up on it never see how much is put down that it was death by an unknown cause. And it's a lot of that.
I think a lot of what's going on with like Fukushima and the oil spills and all that is orchestrated by the elite, because there are a lot of Illuminati cards, like for instance, the oil spills. We just had another oil spill up here in California. Did you see that?
Uh-huh.
And in the Illuminati card game, it shows a seagull standing there all covered with oil.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the protocols of Zion, you know, they always said those weren't real, but if you start reading them, you find that they are following right along with what was written in that. And then you've got what we call the Guidestones in Georgia that are in North Georgia that specifically state that the population will be reduced to a certain, you know, state to be able to be maintained.
Did you know that Obama just visited those a few months ago?
You know, it was funny that somebody has carved a 2014 in one of the actually cut out a section that's a block, and they put a 2014 in one of the sides of that. And I find it very strange. I have visited them before, and it's the funny thing is that they sit out in the middle of out in the middle of nowhere on a little 2-lane highway that's like halfway paved.
How far are you from there?
Well, I'm probably about 4 hours from there. It's more up toward the Atlanta area, and I'm in South Georgia. Yes.
You went and saw them?
Oh, yes, I did. And like I say, they're sitting out in the middle of a field right side of a 2-lane highway in the middle of nothing but farmland. It's not any. It's kind of like you're driving over these little hills, which Elberton is kind of up in what you call the North Georgia hills, up before you get into the mountains. But it's just sitting out there in the middle of nowhere, and nobody really knows how it got there. And that's the strangest thing when you get up there and you look at it, and it's got all this stuff written in all these different languages. You know, there's always been the question, you know, who the Christian guy was that put it up there. I had a guy that was doing some research with me. He swore it was Ted Turner. Who knows? You know, who knows? But when you talk about Illuminati and people playing games, it's just interesting the way that they've got it fixed, kind of like Stonehenge. But it's nothing like Stonehenge. It's not big like Stonehenge. It's just tall, and it's got the granite stones, and they're carved. And like I said, they've got a unique way that the sun hits them and holes in them, kind of like you would think Stonehenge was in years past. But it's very Masonically done, architectural-wise. So you know that the game's being played with, you know, secret societies and what they put up there. But the fact is that they follow the protocols of Zion.
I think putting that 2014 stone in was the date of the beginning mark, because they were little messages when that guy, they videoed that guy and put him up on YouTube of him taking that stone down, and they were going, you know, oh, that's neat, and he was busting the old one up. Did you notice when he was busting the old one up, and these people, they were unreal that they wanted a piece of that evil, but he would say, would you like a chip?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that's kind of like a little message. Do you want a chip? Here, I'll give you a chip.
Well, it's the same thing as the Masonic groups in our area do what they call the CHIP program, where they go into schools and get the children to swab their mouths and get the DNA, and they call it the CHIP program in case the child was to ever be abducted or whatever. And I'm like, okay, you know what the Bible says. Why in the world would you absolutely name what you're doing the CHIP program? I think I just think it's like you say.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you think he would say, would you like a piece of this?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I just think the way they use these names and stuff is kind of telling you what they're doing right in your face. And that's what I'm saying, until you start looking at all this, these red flags don't like hit you and go, well, you know, isn't that kind of strange? It's like, for example, when the Vatican went into Arizona and they secured Indian land that, you know, Indians have to, on the reservation, they have to pay to or get a permit to cross over where this observatory is. And then they turn around, literally, the Vatican names their telescope Lucifer? Really? Excuse me, but isn't that the star that fell from heaven that's not the bright and morning star, you know, that sightens Jesus Christ? Why in the world would you use that name?
Well, we know why, because that's who they really worship.
Well, that's right. But the average Joe Blow, I'm like, really? Are they not paying attention?
You know,
the
thing is, a lot of people that don't look down the rabbit hole like we do, they just go through life just going, oh, there's the Pope, isn't that neat what he wears? But I never thought anything about what he wears, but if you pay attention and look at what he has on, he's got a hat with an upside-down crucifix on it.
Exactly. Now, they'll turn around and say, well, that's because, he's the vicar of Peter, and Peter was crucified upside down. They'll try to use that as an excuse, but I find it very interesting that the rest of the stuff that's on the regalia is an X, a red cross X is equal. It's not like a traditional cross. And that X like that is the same X that was used way back in Egypt, which was a secret society. And I followed that X and how it was done and considered the mark of Cain, and it's right there on their regalia. And then you look at the fish head, and people will say, well, it's because he's a fisherman of men. Well, you go back and you look at the Sumerian text, and you find that Onis and those kinds of gods that came out of supposedly the water to teach the Sumerian civilization, they were part fish, scaled like reptilians. And, of course, we know that Zechariah Sitchin's work says that they were the Anunnaki who were came down to earth, and they brought mankind all this knowledge. They were actually fallen angels that were put down on the earth. But, the fact that you can go back and look at the architectural drawings of these things with wings and half their body's human and the other half is like a reptilian whatever, you got to stop and think, pay attention to what's going on here. Because these pagan traditions of reptiles and scales and
let me ask
fish heads and, oh, my gosh.
Have you seen any of the videos of some of the pictures of these women that can stick their tongue out, and it looks like their tongue is almost like a snake? And they also, when a lot of them, there's one of Miley Cyrus on YouTube that I just saw, where they stopped when she was blinking her eyes, they stopped the camera, and you can actually see like a lizard. You know how a lizard's eye closes over their, like there's a film that closes over their pupil?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see her eye do that.
Well, I think that that there is something here with us, and I've always said that from the research that I did back into Eden and how the DNA was constituted and how it came through the flood, that there is literally a serpent lineage among us. And these beings look human, but yet they're not. And I think that explains quite well why when Moses and them were coming out and going to the Promised Land, that God told them that everybody that they encountered, man, woman, child, animal, to kill it. And, people used to say, well, why would God tell them to be murderers? Well, the problem was there was something about those beings no different than Goliath and all of that situation where those beings were here. They looked human. I mean, we have unearthed, skulls that were huge. There's no doubt that these were giants, but they had a human look. And then you've got the skulls that are elongated that were a part of the Egyptian pharaohs. These things were not like you and I. And so that lineage of something that's different, and I will call it a serpent lineage, is among us. And it thrives on sexuality and all the perversions that really happened with Cain's lineage.
You guys, don't we have webbed fingers? Look at your fingers. There's webbing, and also we have tails when we're fetuses. I'm going to mute out.
Yes, we do have the web fingers, and we have those kinds of things with the tail being kind of like that in a child, and in the way that we're formed. So I think that if anything that it tells us is that over the course of history, we have actually gone through a lot of changes in our physical makeup, but that our originality was such that we probably didn't have the kinds of things that we now absolutely have. And, of course, we can go back and look at some of the changes from, like, for example, the way the Egyptian heads, Pharaoh's heads were, and we can look at King Tut's brain, now that we have the capability of looking at the elongated skulls, the bigger brain capability.
And they show us this stuff through the movies. You know, remember the movie of the Conehead people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that it's an indoctrination. It's an indoctrination to look at this kind of stuff. And the more that it can make us question maybe that God was not in control, or we were just like haphazardly happened, you know, something blew up one day and the world began. If they can make us feel that there's no hope or there's no reason for us being here, that we are just another grain of sand on the ocean floor, that's what they want. Because if we can be brought to the point that of just do my thing, you know, and then I'm dead and gone, then you have no, you have no fight against the enemy. He's got you. When you start trying to live by what the laws of God were directed toward humanity to follow, then you get what you call a spirit of, you know, in other words, you go through condemnation, and then you want to rectify that. But if you don't feel that there's any reason to be here, and you're just here, and that you're going to do your thing, and then you're just dead and gone, then you don't stop and think that there is a spirit that lives within you that's going to be judged, because the Bible tells us that he blew into Adam the breath of life. And that is different, that man became a living soul. So there is something that lives within us that was not in the animal kingdom. And it was not in the really male and female that was first created in Genesis, the first chapter. That there's something about the generation of Adam and Eve and that involvement of a breath of life.
Right. The Bible actually says the serpent came to the woman.
That's
Think
right.
about that.
And his intent was to destroy what God had originally planned, because if he could mix it, that's what the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You look at the tree of life, it produced one thing, life. You looked at an apple tree, it produced one thing, an apple. You looked at, a bird, bluebird, it produced one thing, a bluebird. But of all the things that were in that garden, the only thing that was mixed was good and evil. And when you see something mixed like that, it was telling us that that serpent mixed with good. His evil was mixed with good, and that's, a lot of people don't like to hear that really Eve had a sexual relationship with this being that was considered a serpent. And the Bible tells us it's the same serpent in Revelation that was here with us in the Garden of Eden. And she was not afraid of this being, because he was very smart, he was very cunning, he was very beguiling, and he seemed to be able to take God's word and twist it around enough that she was willing to listen to him. And, of course, in innocence, it's like we're talking about what's going on right now, is people are going after children because of their innocence. If you can grab them while they're innocent, then they don't really stop to think, well, I should not have done that. But in the case of Adam and Eve, they were still in a very immature state. They were naked. They were not ashamed, meaning they had, at that point, not had any sexual relationship, but yet they were married. And the institution of marriage that God placed on, the moment that Eve got involved with that serpent, there was all kinds of things. We're talking about adultery. We're talking about mixing between something that was not supposed to be, because God intended proceed after your kind. And that's why he said in the curse that he placed on the serpent is that, your seed and this woman's seed will always be at enmity between each other. And a lot of people will say, well, Cain and Abel, they were Adam and Eve's children, but they were not Adam and Eve's children. Abel was Adam and Eve's child, but Cain was between that serpent and Eve. And the bad thing is that when Adam was there with her, he knew God's commandment, and as the head of household, and as what the Bible says, the husband is to be like Christ and who is willing to die for, the bride, he allowed what happened between Eve and that serpent to occur, and he didn't stop it. And then he tried to cover his tracks by having, a sexual relationship with Eve because he's now seeing what the whole deal is about. And I know when I was first really came to the understanding of this, I was sitting at my dining room table doing some research, and I pushed out crying because I had never heard anything like that. And I'm going, oh, my gosh, this is what happened. And so I started doing some research because I always want to prove. I come up with a thought or whatever, and I've never ever heard it before. I was kind of like, okay, well, is there anything in the science literature that tells me that if a woman goes with a man 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours before she goes with, let's say, her husband and has a sexual relationship, could she end up with giving birth to, say, like twins, where the first child would be from the first encounter and the second child would come from her husband? And there's all kinds of cases that are documented in the medical literature that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, you know how Maury Povich does that DNA testing for everyone. I've seen it on his show.
Yes.
There were 2 children, one by each, actually by 2 different men, and they were twins.
That's right. And like I say, it's interesting when you go back and you look at Cain, how he was not, his thought processes and his jealousy against Abel, you just don't come up with what you call psychotic behavior against somebody, things of wanting to kill and anger and all that. That was not really the way Adam and Eve had been created. So you're like, where did he get that genetic tendency? Because, once you study genetic tendencies, especially in psychotic behavior, you find that typically will run within a family. And what does it tell us in the Bible? That, that Cain was of his father, the devil, Satan. Actually, Cain is never mentioned in Adam's lineage at all. So when you start talking about this, people will just get really upset by it. And I'm like, well, let's just look at the facts. Let's just lay the facts out on the table. And that's what I did in my Beguile series. I was very straightforward. Let's look at what it talks about. What's the word eat mean? When somebody eats, when she ate with the serpent. Well, unfortunately, in the English language, when we translate Hebrew to English, we don't always use the same word. We use a common word. And if you go back and you get your Strong's Concordance out and you start looking at the Hebrew change-up on that, you find out that the word ate in the Bible or eat in the Bible means sex. No difference than you uncovered your father's nakedness. People will only want to say that Ham had a sexual relationship with his father, Noah. Well, if you go back and you look in Leviticus and other places where it's all mentioned about that kind of stuff, when you uncover your father's nakedness, you slept with his wife. So, if you start doing the research on it and go back and look at the Hebrew and how it was really laid out, then you start seeing the true picture. But I've never understood why Christians couldn't come to terms with something of this nature. I mean, I understand when you start teaching kids about Adam and Eve and you want to talk about using an apple because you don't want to talk about sexual things with them, but then there comes a time when the adults have got to understand that apple, there is no apple mentioned in Genesis. Most people think there's an apple, so they ate an apple. I mean, that's what you brought up as a little Bible school kind of rhyme believing in, and it's not the whole story. It's kind of like Paul Harvey used to say, you got to know the rest of the story, and unless you're opening your eyes up to see it, you don't see how Satan has used all of that to control humanity through our history and actually have a serpent lineage on earth today that they're all connected and they rule the world. They're the richest, they're the most powerful, They're blue bloods. They marry within their group. They can trace their pedigrees as far back as they want to trace it. And they're the ones that cause the wars, and we're the little commoners of people that they control and manipulate.
Dr. Joy, have you seen this new series they got out on TV called The Messengers?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, the thing about it is the Watchers, we go back and look at the Book of Enoch, and people say, well, why wasn't the Book of Enoch included in the Bible? Well, the Book of Enoch, if it was written by either Enoch of the Cain lineage or Enoch from the Adam lineage, then that was before the flood. So was it put down on some kind of parchment and given to Noah, and he took it across the flood, and then, they baked it in clay like the Sumerians did and kept it, or was it an oral rendition that somebody continued to talk about? Any way you look at it, the Book of Enoch, whether it was manipulated or written or whatever, it talks about these beings. And that was one thing that I think we have to go back and say, that even in the book of Daniel, it talks about a holy one and a watcher came down. Well, a holy one is a good angel, but a watcher is a fallen angel, meaning that you got two different kinds of things, out there that we don't just normally just look at. And I think that when you talk about things like messengers and watchers, it's kind of an indoctrination program. But in reality, it's very, very real. I mean, you go back and you look at Abraham and his children and how they encountered, the angels that came and talked to them. They looked like men. They came and told him that Sarah's going to have a baby at 90 years of age, and or 80 years or 90, whatever it was. And they laughed about it because literally she shouldn't have been able to have. And then you think about Lot and his children, and when the angels went to see them to get them out of Sodom and Gomorrah, the people were all homosexuals in that area, wanted to have sex with the angels. And then, the fact that they looked human. They were pretty, and they were not ugly. So something in human form, it tells us, entertain strangers because you don't know if it's an angel. I mean, the Bible tells you that. So the fact that things can be walking around here with us, I mean, I've had an encounter with something one time that we had a flat tire on the side of the highway. I was going to pick up a very important person to do a celebrity event for some mentally retarded people and Special Olympics and that kind of thing. And out of the clear blue, we get out and the tire's flat, and this person's just behind us and jumps out and puts a tire on for us. And we turn around to say, well, thank you very much, and there's nobody there. They're gone. And I'm like, well, where did he go? So, in my mind, I've always felt like that there was an angel. Yeah. I needed an angel, and it was there, and it was gone. And it looked like a young boy, and he looked human, and but it was just, like I say, most people don't stop on the side of the road and change somebody's tire and then don't stick around to get, like, maybe somebody say, well, can I give you $50 for doing this? I mean, literally. Most times you have a flat tire, you could be standing out there for 3 hours waiting, like, help me out, So I will always believe that there have been situations. For example, I have a good friend, and she had a friend that was in the hospital, and he was actually dying. And all of a sudden, this doctor has this nurse, the person looks like a nurse, show up and say, this is what this person needs up on room so-and-so, whatever. And they go up there, and he does what the nurse had told him possibly to do, and then they start trying to find the nurse, and there's no such nurse by that name or anything, and what the doctor did saved the man's life. So there's weird things like that I think that we do entertain strangers and that they're angels. So the possibility of something walking around here with us, no different than the days of Abraham and Lot. Same thing happened, and we know it happened. It's recorded in the Bible.
We have to be very careful how we treat anybody, because as far as I'm concerned, we're all equal. We're all human beings. whether we're poor and homeless or, or high standard and got a bunch of money. It doesn't really matter. We're all equal.
Well, it says we're all the same in God's eyes. We're all God's children. We're created in His image. And that one day we'll understand why there were some of us who had to suffer. There were some of us who were born, blind, and there are some of us who were born wealthy, and why it had to be a part of the grand agenda. And I think that once you get to the point of being in the presence of God and you can understand the bigger picture, this time on this earth is like so little compared to all eternity. And, we can look out at, eternity in a way when we look at the Hubble telescope and just see forever and ever and ever, that time is nothing for what we're spending it here, but yet it's to prepare us either to be approved of or disapproved, because it says the Spirit comes from God and it's going to go back for judgment because He's who gave it. So there's got to be a judgment day, and I think that's important that, like you say, people treat people like they're their brother and sister, because according to the Bible, you are their brother and sister in Christ, because you are all created in His image.
Well, we are in the end times. We are seeing the signs, and I'm really looking forward to see what's going down in September, because I really do feel that when the fourth blood moon comes in, that we are really going to see a lot of action around here.
Well, the thing that I've mentioned in some of my work about the blood moons and the different kinds of timing and the Jewish holidays and the feasts, they're all very, very important. If they had not been, then Jesus would not have been a part of that, when He was here in the temple and those kinds of things, if that was not supposed to be important to pay attention to. And, of course, we know that the Bible tells us that God made the sun, moon, and stars for signs. I mean, it literally tells us that. Now, some people get off on the astrology kick and they want to know the future and all that. I mean, that's not what God intended. But the people who study the stars, I mean, you look at the wise men, they knew that star, when it was in the east, that Christ had been born, literally. Yeah. And they followed it knowing that there was something at the end of that because of the timing and what had been prophesied in the book of Isaiah and that kind of stuff. They were prepared for it. They were looking for those kind of signs. And it's no different today. The Bible has told us there's going to be changes in the sun, moon, and stars, and you may not know the exact days, but it says you're going to know the time and the season, just like those wise men that were watching. They knew the time, they knew the season, they saw the star, and they knew it was fixing to happen. And I think when we're watchers on the wall like God expected us to be, that when we see these things coming to pass, that we prepare ourselves to be like the parable of the virgins who had their oil in their lamps, so that when the bridegroom came, you didn't get left because you didn't have your oil in your lamp where you could see how to make it to the temple. I think that right now, for people who don't know about Christ or don't know about these prophecies or have never engaged in trying to understand the book of Revelation, they need to get involved in it, because your very being and who you are and what you will be one day in the spirit realm of resurrection is an amazing thing. I do a lot of research on the Shroud of Turin. Been very interested in the Shroud of Turin for, I guess, since I was a child, when I first actually saw the shroud itself in a magazine that my dad brought home. The fact that we can look at the Shroud of Turin and know that the most recent research that's been done proves that cloth came from the time that Jesus was here, and all these other little things that have been done to that cloth have been to just trip up and keep anybody from knowing the truth. Because the moment that the Shroud of Turin is proven to be undeniably real, then you have a face of God on there. You've got a face of Jesus Christ. You've got a body that resurrected under very unusual and strange circumstances that we cannot reproduce. And the Shroud is the most researched relic in all of history. It's no different than if we find a piece of Noah's Ark. It proves that there was a flood. There was a Noah's flood. In fact, all the major cultures of the world all have a flood story. They may have a different name for the person, but they all have the same exact story about the flood and how bad it was and how the animals were saved and all that kind of stuff. When you start proving these kinds of things, then you have to go, well, now, what does that do to all the other religions in the world? Well, it means that you got to start looking at what the Bible is saying. And that, right now, they don't want that to happen because they want to be able to bring the religions under a one-world unification of religion. So we accept everybody's religion, accept everybody's God, that we worship the same God by a different name.
Yeah.
Well, all the religions can do that except
don't
Christianity.
Don't you think that's what the Pope is coming here for in September?
Oh, exactly. The Pope, and my work and the research I've done on Pope Francis, and I go in great detail this in my book, Beguile, Volume 3. He is literally fulfilling St. Malachy's prophecy of the popes. He is Peter the Roman. He is the last and final Pope because when he brings, he's a false prophet. And when he brings these religions together to literally hand over the keys of the kingdom back to who it belongs to, and that's supposed to be the Messiah, then he no longer can be in that Messiah vicar role. And so he is the final Pope. He is Peter the Roman. He is the final Peter because the first Pope was considered Peter because the Catholic Church believes that according to their belief, was that God said, on this rock I build my church. He wasn't talking about Peter, but they tried to look at it like that. He was talking about himself, and the belief in himself. But being able to look at what would the final Peter do, he would, try to unite everybody back together and try to give keys back to its kingdom's rightful owner. But the problem is he's going to be giving it to the Antichrist, and that's all part of the. It's all part of the setup. It's all following right into place, and that's one reason why Pope Benedict stepped aside. No other pope had ever done that before. I mean, when they take these oaths to be the vicar of Christ on earth, you are to live until you die. It don't matter what you die of. I think about John Paul II. He was in a lot worse shape than Benedict. And they tried to say, oh, it's because the Catholic Church was in, disarray, blah, 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 blah. No, when you took that oath, you're to die in office. In other words, what if Jesus had got to the cross and said, oh, God, Father, I'm not ready to do this. I'm not going to. Okay, well, he couldn't do that. He had to die upon the cross. He had to go through that process. But for some reason, Benedict didn't do that. So that tells me that the time is set, that it was time for Peter the Roman, which is, of course, Pope Francis, to be in the position where he's at, to do the unification, to be able to put the Antichrist right where he needs to be and take over. So there's a timeline and there's an agenda that's being followed down to the T. And so when you see that if this is the final Pope and this is what the prophecy of the popes are, and all the other popes will fall right in place with the prophecy of the Pope, why would Francis be any different, not to fulfill what the final, actually third secret of Fatima is all about?
So there's a big red flag because he is going to visit Congress. Well,
yes.
Aren't we supposed to divide state and church?
Oh, please. Not when you've got Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner both being Roman Catholic. Oh, no. This is because they look like they're from each different part. See, that's the thing. This is all a fake. It's like we think we got a Republican and Democratic group. We've got people who are following an agenda, and that's the Roman Catholic agenda of unification. So it's no different than when you've got Masons in your church. They set a blood oath with their brothers. Well, now, are they going to choose to do in the church what's right, or are they going to choose to blackball the guy when he goes down and does something outside in the community? They're going to follow the oath of that Masonic order.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? The same thing is happening in our government like that, but most people don't even realize that Boehner and Pelosi are both Roman Catholic. It's all like smoke and mirrors. That's all I can say. It's like smoke and mirrors. And if you do the research, it's not like we're making up anything here. This is not conspiracy. This is fact.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about my work is I like to put it out there. This is just the facts, you know, and they all line up and point to these people, and I'm like, well, why are they all pointing in these directions? These are the facts. But they'll try to scream, oh, conspiracy, or they can't be that way, and I'm like, well, it sure is funny if you were playing dice in Las Vegas and you had that many coincidences, you'd be winning. You know what I'm saying? You get like 100 out of 100 rolls every time.
Well, as far as, you know, us knowing that there are demonic things out there like black-eyed children and reptilian people, and what would you advise for people that are Christian or spiritual? How do they keep themselves safe from these things, and what would you advise?
Well, I think the biggest thing that you don't want to ever do is to allow anything to enter in. So therefore, if you don't participate in things that open your body up to that, like, for example, don't get into, like, nature worshiping or theosophy, or don't, get into Kundalini and try to bring the circling up the spine into your Holy of Holies, which is your pineal gland. And if you don't, if you don't use sorcery or you don't use drugs, if you don't open your mind up to these kinds of things, and there's, things that I talk about in my book now, Beguile book, about that you don't even have to take, a drug. You can, like, listen to harmonic beats in different ears, and it will cause certain areas of your brain to respond, and it's like you've had a dose of DMT or a dose of ecstasy.
I think they're kind of hypnotizing people through the television and the commercials.
Oh, exactly. When that was being done back when I was a young child in the movie theaters, the first thing they ever did was put, Coca-Cola, and they did the red, and that subliminal messaging of thirst.
You're hungry.
And everybody would run up to the, they were thirsty. They had to have some, and that was the beginning of all that kind of stuff. I talk about Delgado and his work and trying to use particle beams and things like that to beam at people, and I mean, it's just the mind
they do it in the department stores subliminally. They're telling you that you need to spend money and buy stuff, and
that's right. And if you're not careful, then everything that you think could be okay. I mean, it's even in games. I mentioned some of these games that people play with their families, and they show like a fret of guitar running, and then you're playing a guitar, but you're watching the frets and you're doing this kind of stuff. But at the same time, there's lights and sound that's going on that's a hypnotic thing, and then you're being flashed like little symbols, which are very evil. So, while you're watching this, it's no different than a long time ago. When we hypnotize people, you take a pendulum and go back and forth, or either you would watch something going around and around and around in a circle. It's the same thing. If you get locked into it, then whatever you're locked into is then using your mind to implant, subliminally use. And this is all scientific data. I mean, this is not conspiracy that people will sometimes say, oh, that's just conspiracy. It's not. It's all scientific proof of how hypnosis is very real and how it happens, and how you can be totally controlled by it and don't even know it.
Well, what do you think about the movies that they're coming out with? They're showing all these movies of the end times. They just had one that where I can't think of the name of the stupid movie where the guy comes and rescues his wife from the top of the building.
Well, they're talking about doing the one that's just, I guess, coming out about the earthquakes and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I just think it's being played out in your face. It's no different than them, this huge ark that they've got built in Antarctica, and they're putting all the seeds in there, but yet you and I, we don't have any way to get to those seeds.
They're showing us what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's like I say, the red flags are there, and if you read this stuff and you keep up with it, then you can see the red flags. But it's being done right in your face.
Well,
that's the
when I
trickster
see
part of
these
being.
things, I don't know about you, but my spirit, when I get around something that's not right, my spirit tells me. So my question to you is, when you went to the Georgia Guidestones, did you feel anything like the evil there, or because I've heard of people say that they just didn't feel right when they went there.
Well, the thing that was interesting to me is my camera wouldn't work. And I felt like that we were probably on some kind of telluric energy, that they had been set up on a magnetic grid, is what I felt like, because my pictures wouldn't come out that I took.
Interesting.
It was like my pictures were whited out, like they had encountered like either something like exposure, radiation, something, definitely. Yeah, I feel like that there's something very strange about why that's located where it's at, and of course knowing water witching and dowsing and know what dowsing is all about, and how the telluric energy sites, all your Stonehenges, all your megalithic buildings, including all your Mayan pyramids, your Egyptian pyramids, are all located on dragon nodes, and it's crossroads of those magnetic grids that's all over the earth.
Oh, Dr. Joy, we've got 8 minutes left. So what would you like to talk about for our last 8 minutes?
Well, I just think that we need to talk about the fact that the spiritual realm is very real, and that you need to pay attention to what is being done, said, and what you are participating in, that you're not caught off guard, and that times are going to get a lot worse, and they're not going to get better. They're going to be like a woman in childbirth, and we all know that childbirth gets very violent before the child shows up.
Yeah.
So, we're on that downhill slide, but again, the hope and the promise of what the Bible tells us, if it's going to tell us all this stuff's going to happen, it also tells us to look up because your redemption draweth nigh. It also tells you to get your stuff in order, and that the way to get through this and to live and get back to paradise, and you can read the very end of the book of Revelation, to be able to go back to that, you're going to have to be in a pure state. And you're going to have to be approved of by the being that gave you the spirit that has lived through this, giving you choices. Because the animal kingdom lives by animal instinct, but humanity has a choice. We have free will. We were given something very different, very specialized, and there's a payment for that, for having that kind of mentality. Because if not, he could have made us like the male and female in the very beginning of Eden, where he told them to go out and replenish the earth, and to make and have babies after their kind, replenish the earth. Adam and Eve were not told stuff like that. They were in the Garden of Eden. There was a specialization about us. There was a breath of life put in our body, and the Bible talks about the institution of marriage, and that thread runs all the way through the end of days about your pureness and your holiness and that kind of thing. It's an expectation. And if we don't take note of it, then it's between you and the Maker that created you, because nobody can stand for you on that day. You're going to stand for what you did and why you made the choices you made. And if you sit there and say, well, I just didn't think that was real. I just didn't. You got to stop and think. Everybody has a tug on their heart. God put the pineal gland, there's no doubt in my mind, in our brain for communion with Him, to know everything, including the hairs and the number of hairs on the top of your head. You can take hypnosis, and I have seen this done, been a part of hypnosis. You can recount everything from, where you were at in the first grade and who was sitting in front of you and the very color of their hair and clothes and shoes they had on a certain day. Everything in your mind has been totally recorded.
Yep.
Totally recorded. And if mankind can set up a computer that can analyze data, like being that beast of a computer that's out in Utah, on every transaction that we do, every website that we visit in real time, if mankind can do that on every person on this planet, just imagine what God can do.
Amen.
So don't think there's not an answer that you're going to have to give to something that's bigger than any of this. And it wasn't chaotically done, because if you try to say, oh, well, there's a Big Bang Theory, like where did the two atoms come from that bang together?
And you know, like we said earlier, we're seeing all the signs, the days of Noah. We are seeing the signs. So, you know, and it's scary times, but we really don't have to be afraid, do we?
No, because in the end, the promise is that if we will return back to God and paradise is there for us. It was essentially designed for us. We lost it because what did Eve do? She turned to something that God had already told her, don't look at, don't touch, don't have anything to do with. It's not of me. And he gives you the choice. You want him or you don't want him. But you've got the choice. Everybody has that choice. And there's only one person to blame if you have to answer for not choosing him, and it's you. And I think that people, if they would really stop, they're so caught up in their world or rush, and everybody's doing this, and, well, if everybody's doing it, then it's okay if I do it. No, it's not okay. You need, you know, what everybody else was doing, I'd hate to know that I just followed the crowd, and y'all are going to end up down there in hell burning and looking at each other and saying, well, you know, if I hadn't been following you, I just tell people you need to be yourself, and you need to do your investigation, because you are not some chaotic thing that was put on this earth. You have a soul. You are in the image of the very Creator. This is a serious matter. Even though we are all doing different things, we're all part of a big plan. And we can tell it because of the way the fulfillment of the Bible has been carried out. It's not chaotic. It's based on an agenda. And evil's got their agenda because evil's following their plan, just like I'm talking about the final popes and false prophets, Antichrist. They've got their plan. They know exactly when they're going to pull everything off. It's it.
Yes, they do. Well, Dr. Joy, it's been a pleasure having you back, and I will get in touch with you. Like I said, I dumped a pitcher of water on my laptop, so I'm not going to be scheduling any shows right away until I can figure out what I'm going to do with getting my computer fixed. So,
well, I do pray that you'll be able to do what all you need to do and continue, because I think your show is an excellent show, and I think the people that enjoy listening to you will miss you if you're not there for them.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart. Well, yeah, they do miss me when I'm not here. You know, and when I did that, I said, Lord, I need a miracle, because they want $150 to fix it, and I don't have it right now. I'm struggling financially, so I just said, well, you're going to have to give me a miracle, or I'm going to have to, something will happen. You know, but I'll get there. I have faith, you know. I'll get there. I'm on a prayer site. Like I said.
It's just Satan trying to keep you from doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, well, you know that it's not going to happen.
Well, listen, I've enjoyed it so much, and I hope to be back on your show again.
Thank you, sweetie. And I am going to, when I do get back straightened out with my computer problem, I will get back in touch with you, and maybe we can have you come back one night next month.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and you have a blessed evening. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. And like I said, I don't have my regular setup here tonight,